Okay, thanks everybody for sticking around. We're going to talk about probably one platform that has been challenged in many of the sessions beforehand. A lot of the sessions have been how do we get to a post-TV era, how do we move the money from TV to other screens. We've got several people here who have built businesses around television, either as we know it today or as it might be in the future. So what I'd like to do is, as part of an introduction for each of you, and starting with Ty, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your both either personal and or corporate vision is for the future of television. And for the future of television, A, you can define what television might mean, and B, let's think about a 10-year time frame.
Sure. So my name is Ty Taylor. I am in charge of smart TV services for Samsung. And I came in, I've been doing interactive TV work for the last 17 years or so. I'm going to give a personal vision because I'm not authorized to talk about anything that Samsung is doing. But generally speaking, I think some of the themes that you saw on the mobile panel were around personalization. And so generally speaking, from a trend perspective, you'll see more people, screen time is going to increase. It'll be done on a personalized basis. There's a secular question of whether that means that people need large TV sets, but what I would suggest is that the consumption of television will continue, but it'll take a different shape and form. And so people who are in the media space, whether it's print or visual or video, will simply need to adapt to personal consumption streams, smaller screen devices, and everybody at the home having a different device rather than clustering around a single TV set.
Ira Rubenstein, I'm currently CEO of Mimi Media. We're a public company in the middle of a transaction of a major mobile firm in Latin America. Previously, I headed up digital at Marvel, digital comics, video, games, and previous to that, Sony Pictures in movies, TV, film, and games, and kind of done interactive TV since the web TV box and doing interactive Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, going old school. In terms of the future of TV, I'm a member of the Motion Picture Academy as well as the TV Academy. And what I've seen in the Motion Picture Academy meetings, Oscar-winning actors and directors who are doing more and more work in TV. And what you're starting to see now is that it's not a stigma to do work in TV, and the quality of what's coming to TV, quote unquote traditional TV, is just being higher and higher. And what you're starting to see is that there's, like Mark was saying last night, it is a golden age of television. And what's happening in the terms of quality and the breadth and the amount of buyers of TV is unparalleled. You have, for example, Steven Spielberg is doing a show for Xbox. And I think that would have been unheard of 5 years ago. So what's coming to TV is this quality, and then what also is coming, I see, is the unbundling of TV. We saw with the music and the CD-ROM, the unbundling of music, and that's what's starting to happen in TV. It's first starting in the unbundling of what's going on for a cable bundle in the terms of different networks, but I think you're going to see it even further going down to the individual shows.
Mark? Yeah, hi, my name is Mark Heat. I work on the brand strategy side for Twitter. I actually joined Twitter via the Bluefin acquisition a few months ago. So in regards to TV, the way I kind of like to look at it is that I'm really looking at it from the consumer standpoint. And the way I see it developing is that on the one side, the consumer or the viewer really wants to have instant access and to entertainment. So that would be like a Netflix and basically having that piece of access. But I think on the other side, we have the consumer who really wants to watch something entertaining and then have a conversation around that piece, right? That's what makes it interesting. Like if we would actually look at, for example, the Super Bowl, and we would put that on Netflix and everybody watches it at different times, there would be no conversation around it and it would very much fall flat, right? the fun part is to actually talk about this piece. And so what I see happening in the space is that the networks and shows are going to try to integrate the consumer more and more into their specific piece or into their shows and networks to get the conversation going. And then, hopefully, if they actually can figure out, how can we do it to where we integrate the consumer or the viewer, but then at the same time giving them access to the entertainment piece when they want it. I think that's really the space that things should go into.
So I want to hit a point, Ty, that you brought up about an increase in screen time. I think one thing probably a lot of people would have been surprised to predict or surprised that it occurred would have been since the introduction of the web, the amount of time the average American watches live television, not delayed, but live, has gone up 25% on a per person basis. So this notion of increased screen time, we're thinking about more programming and other things, but how might you imagine seeing that in a company that makes a lot of different devices? Obviously, you're focused on the television screen device, but what will be the screen experience if you think the screens are going to increase?
So right now, from a tab, again, I'm speaking just from personal basis. All disclaimers appropriate. But right now, the largest tablet that you can buy is 10.1 inches. If you go into for those of you who have Teslas that are in Silicon Valley, that seems to be a thing. They have it's like a 14, I believe it's a 14-inch tablet that they use to drive all of the climate control and things of that sort that you see inside of the car. Right now, the most popular TV screen size is 40 to 45 inches, 40 to 42 actually. And so what I think you'll see is that there's a whole space in between 10.1 inches and 40 to 42 inches that it's not being addressed in terms of something that's grippable, that has a touch interface. And it's with that I think that you'll see opportunities, because that truly is a personal TV set. It's the notion that it's connected to all of your the conditional access that you need for the HBOs and things of that sort. But it's portable, and you can bring it throughout the house, potentially outside of the house.
Yeah, so one thing Mark Andreessen said last night at dinner was, and he said it in sort of an offhand way as if it was just a widely recognized assumption, was that, well, of course, in your TV will be touchable.
Right.
Do you imagine that kind of experience? I mean, you talk about the grippable and the smaller, is there this notion that people actually might want to walk up and touch their screen, do you think?
Yeah, again, because I think that the notion that a bunch of people are going to sit down in front of a set as a family is I think that's going to go away. And so a gesture-based interface that includes touch, I think it's a natural evolutionary path that you'll see. And you'll see people being comfortable carrying larger tablets. I think we'll see the sales numbers from our competitor next quarter, and we'll figure out whether the iPad Mini or the Air did better for them.
Uh-huh. Interesting. So Ira, you brought up the point about that it's cool to do TV now, and you see a lot of the best talent moving into it. I heard Leslie Moonves speak a couple weeks ago, and he talked about the number of shows that were bought this year, and he compared the last 4 years, and it's unbelievable. It went from 40 to over 100 shows have been bought because everyone's buying them. You've also talked about the channel bundle potentially going away, and right now the channel bundle supports about $35 billion of investment every year. Some say that if the bundle goes away, maybe half of that investment goes away because of the predictability. Do you think is that accurate, or what happens? What happens if you have the channels unbundle and you don't have this massive amount of predictable spend coming from TV distributors?
Well, I mean, the cable bundle is very complex because you also have a whole bunch of sports rights tied into that. And the costs of what's going on with sports programming, which I think is a little bit out of whack in terms of what's getting passed. So let's take that aside. I think what you're going to see is that the shows and the brands, their costs are going to have to be driven down in producing content. So the maker studios of the world who are making cheaper content are going to have a future. So you're going to see a cost being driven down for making of content because it is getting cheaper, and you're going to see that the show itself will have wider distribution and a better chance of success. So
where's the guild going to play in that? I thought one thing was interesting. I was talking to some of the people from Warner Brothers webisode production group, and they showed me a 10-episode series that they had shot, and they said like for 1.3 million. And I said, what, per episode? Because they had known actors. It was like high level of production.
It was 1.3 total?
It was 1.3 total. And I said, that's incredible. That is like 10, 14-minute episodes. And they said, well, that's because we didn't have to use the regular SAG rules. They said, if we decide to now take this and put it on TV, we're going to have to negotiate what might be another $7 or $8 million.
That's right.
Because we didn't have the sets loaded with as many people and other things. So we can imagine a world where cheaper made, biteable content might be consumed. But I mean, you live in the middle of this ecosystem. Can you imagine the guild backing down?
I don't think they're going to back down easily, but the fact is it's going to happen. Because, right now, I mean, the days of 3 old white guys in New York programming the networks for everyone's over, okay? And if you're a network, and I'm not a network,
but didn't those get a 7-year deal on Time Warner Cable?
People are doing their own programming.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's happening. People are doing their own programming, and they're going to select what they want to watch, and then that is going to then drive what advertisers are going to reach, and that's going to drive the whole model.
But one thing I find interesting is, because I personally believe we're going to see some enormous changes in, let's say, the 7-year time frame. But if you look at the audience advertising minutes generated today in the half hour of Judge Judy against adults 18 to 49, it exceeds the total amount of ad weight that was delivered by all of YouTube in America today against 18 to 49. And she's going to do that Monday and Tuesday and Friday and next month. And when she goes away, Judge Joanne, who replaces her, will deliver just as Judge Wapner used to. So how does the web, and the Gangnam Style was amazing, but when they tried to follow it up, it didn't work. How does the digital and the personalized content deal with the predictability that drives the economics in the classic TV distribution world? And it's going to be for anybody, because you all, I'm sure, have visions on this.
Well, I think quickly, Henry Blodgett last week, in another bid to manipulate the market, released a deck that covered sort of like the state of digital. And the interesting thing there in terms of time shared is the time spent per economic unit. The only one that's really out of whack is print. So the time spent and dollars spent on mobile and time spent and dollars spent on television seem to be fairly aligned. The web is a little bit off, but print fairly off in terms of more dollars have to migrate there, but print is really out of whack. And so I think we really have to see the migration away from print dollars into the mobile and web space to really cost justify both these cheaper programs that we've discussed before, but the types of programs that you're describing as well.
Mm-hmm. So Mark, you and I talked about something a little bit in advance that one thing I find is interesting, and I guess this was sort of just announced, or at least just publicized in the trades, that Twitter now sells TV audiences to advertisers, but you don't have to buy the ads on the TV. Yep. And we saw from Adam Bain earlier today a presentation about that. One of the things with the rise of Netflix and Amazon's Prime and some of these other services they're not ad-supported services there. And so, might we see a rotation of advertising off of the TV set relative to TV content and onto companion screens or others? And is that what Dick Costello is planning for all of us?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that, there are basically two factors. I really look at it from a strategy standpoint, right? So what Adam was talking about earlier was TV ad targeting. So you basically run a TV commercial and then you have an extension on the social platform, right? So the benefit is that you really get this 1-2 punch. I'm showing you a message or a story about my brand and my product, and I'm extending that into a conversation into the digital platform. So I basically reach you on multiple platforms now and get back, I create frequency and reach and stuff like that. And, which brings up a good point, because we always talk about like second screen environment, but in all reality, like if we really look at it, it's just that consumers are engaged with multiple platforms at the same time, around the TV, especially. And, like in the past, we used to look at like digital consumers and traditional consumers. They're just consumers, right? So with TV conversation targeting that was released, that is basically just going after the audience itself. That's correct. So with a Netflix, that will definitely help. You're missing that 1-2 punch, right? So the question for the brand really is do I want to have this 1-2 punch in this extension of where I show a message and create branding and then have you take a specific KPI, or do I actually just want to have you go after a specific audience and get in front of that audience?
So how do you think, in the beginning of the web, there were a couple companies that built frames within the browser around the content and started selling ads on top of the ads that the website showed. And I think USA Today led the litigation against that in probably 96 or 97, and the judge made it pretty clear that he was going to rule it was a copyright infringement. I guess we have to start thinking now with the layer of the TV, how do you think the content owners might be reacting around this idea that their content will be monetized by somebody else, maybe even by maybe even in a way that not only is, let's say, capturing the commercial value, but is even undermining the commercial value, because if there's a mention of a particular brand in within the content, that you may particularly use conquesting advertising on a tablet.
Yeah, that's definitely something that some networks might look into in regards of losing some of those dollars into that space. The way we like to position is that one of the benefits too is that, let's say for example, if I'm a brand and there's a specific show, a specific audience that I think I want to get in front of, it's very expensive to do that on TV, right? To put a few $1 million against that. So now what I can actually do is on the Twitter platform via TV conversation target.
So you can undermine their pricing, not just their.
Yeah, well, you get in front of the audience and hope your audience, your message resonates, and then basically see if you want to make a change to your media plan, right? So there are multiple options from that standpoint.
So each one of you talked about elements that could significantly lower the cost structure in the existing marketplace. Might the future of television be one of these $0 billion businesses, as they used to describe what Craigslist did to the newspaper classifieds, in that Craigslist generates several $100 million in revenue and displaced about $10 billion in doing that? Could we imagine that happening around the whole ecosystem? Maybe Ty? Which might be, the winners certainly might be the users.
I look at it as, Ty's got a great platform, and, I'm Vivo. I have an app on this platform. Okay, what's the difference? Why do I need to be on Time Warner or Comcast?
Yeah, I actually can't answer this.
Yeah. Well, what I could say is maybe since, I do think one of the interesting points is going to be understanding the new distribution points for content, because I do think the notion of being able to aggregate audiences in predictable fashion and deliver them and deliver positioning. I think the one thing that does seem certain to me about the future of television is the television. I don't know how many intermediate boxes might get there. Does Chromecast even need to be a dongle if in fact it could have easily been just built inside and it doesn't need to be there? So I do think we're going to see some really cataclysmic changes just because of the contracts and the cost differences. Who do you think might be some of the, we're all talking about a certain amount of disruption. Who might be some of the winners and losers, Mark? What do you think? In the future, let's just talk about winners. That way it'll all be very positive as we go into the weekend.
Yeah, I think, again, for example, in Netflix, I can definitely see them having some big disruption in the marketplace. I think for them, the biggest thing that they need to figure out is that if I have a new program and I want to monetize on that, how do I do that to where I bring people together so they can have a conversation around it, right? When I watch a new show, the biggest thing for me is, in the past was around the water cooler. Oh my God, did you watch this? Did you watch the show? What happened and stuff like that. So I think from that standpoint, I think that's the trick to monetize on that mostly.
Go ahead.
So I think if you look at the trends in digital advertising, it's towards targeting and buying through exchanges and bulk purchases and things of that sort. And the TV industry has not been disrupted in that way. I'm not suggesting that it will in the near future, but I think 5 to 10 years out, I think there will be opportunities, and I'm not talking about your company, though you're in the space, for people who are doing digital video ad exchanges to really play a more prominent role in the way that television time is bought and sold. And to date, there's nobody who's operating at scale, so that's a wide open playing field.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big winner is going to be content creators, because it's still really, really hard to make a good show. make a good movie, make a good game, show, or anything. Making content's really, really hard.
Yep.
And I think the people who make it will still get rewarded for making it. And I think it was mentioned again last night. I do think we're going to kind of flash back to the 50s and have shows sponsored by, whether it's the Texaco Radio Hour or what have you, but brands tightly aligned with the content.
So you took one issue off the table earlier, which I'd like to actually put back in because it is is driving so much of the economics in TV and video, which is sports. So how do you imagine some of the sports rights and costs going? I mean, is it possible for the pricing to continue to increase where we've got conferences doing $10 billion multi-year deals?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, the need there is that if you're a fledgling network and you're trying to place a bet, in the NBA, there's this whole thing about let's tank and follow the San Antonio Spurs strategy, and that's a misinterpretation of the strategy. But what we can point to in the TV space is that Fox as a network placed an early expensive bet on the NFL and grew into being what it is today, which is third, fourth, second, depending upon the way that you want to look at it. But 18 to 49, they're number 2. Because they overpaid for the NFL. NBC Sports overpaid for the Premier League. And so there aren't that many sports rights that are available. When they do come up, I think people will be jumping over the table. And the latest rumor is that Google's talking about paying for the NFL Sunday ticket package, which means that and that's a new entrant into the field. So those fees are only going to escalate because if you're not in the top 5%, the only way to get there is through sports rights.
Yeah. So think about this. You bring up the Google rumors over the Sunday ticket, which DirecTV has been paying about $1 billion a year for, and probably represents, maybe let's just say 15%, let's just be conservative, 15% of their subscribers, that's like their core reason for doing it. What happens? I mean, the numbers that are being thrown around are maybe $3 or $4 billion that Google would pay for that. What happens to these incumbents that might, what happens to a DirecTV if it loses 15% of its subscribers?
Depends on how much their other programming people are valuing. And, I think a lot of it with the cable guys or the satellite is that second screen out of home or in-home experience, how you can get that content to your devices. And, whether it's the Hopper and Dish or, what Comcast we're seeing they're doing, I think, they have to accelerate that sort of technology to keep consumers. Because otherwise they're a dumb pipe. And there's lots of those.
So when we think about, there was one of the sessions earlier, they were talking about I guess in this morning was about, the challenges to innovate and be disruptive within an organization. One of the things that's been talked about is maybe Google doesn't just buy individual rights, maybe it just buys the companies with rights. So I'll just have a little fun here, and we'll use this to sort of wrap this up. I want to throw out some potential combinations, and I want to pretend, and you can each pretend that you've just been asked to put this together and run, and what would you do? So Mark, it's extraordinary, but you have just been given by Tim Cook the opportunity to run TWX, Time Warner, which Tim just bought for a somewhat premium, I think $52 billion. It's going to come out at closing today. So you now own the largest television network, cable networks, the largest movie studio in the world and movie library in the world. You own the largest, now maybe second largest subscription premium service. So what are you doing as the new head of Time Warner working inside Apple?
I'm going to retire. Is that cool? What would I do? I think the biggest thing is that, what I would look at is really from like an Apple standpoint, like what technology does Apple have and how can we integrate those two pieces, right? Like one thing that I see more and more, especially in the TV space, is that TV shows are basically integrating the consumer into their shows, right? So, for example, we had Hawaii Five-O came up with a telecast where the consumer was able to vote how they wanted the show to end. right? So that's kind of what I'm talking about in regards of, can we give the consumer something where they get the content and the entertainment when they want it, but all still get it at the same time, and then also dictate how it is going to end.
So you're going to break all of your existing distribution deals, and you're just going to essentially throw it all into the Apple Store?
I don't know. I mean, if I would have my wish, that's
Well, I mean, you're
the
running
direction.
it. Tim's giving it to you.
That's the direction I would like to go.
Okay,
I mean,
so you break every deal as quickly as you possibly can. You go a la carte and on demand.
I would like to, yeah.
And you probably level all of your competition as well. Okay, interesting.
Hopefully.
So Ira, you have a bit of a different circumstance. You've actually just been recruited by Mike Linton to go. Actually, the studio is going to now run the Sony Electronics division and to try to bring that magic to it. And you're actually in charge now of running the electronics division that's making the television devices particularly, but for the studio. So, and of course, in now control of not just the movie studio, but the TV studio as well, since that's where the health is. So what are you going to do?
Shoot myself. I actually was at Sony for many years, and I actually worked on something similar for Howard Stringer for a year when it was Sony United, and trying to help get content across all the devices. Sony is a very, very challenging company. In a perfect world, what I would look towards is actually doing more what Samsung's doing. I've always been impressed by what Samsung's done in the last 10 years, and you can see that CES every year. That ability to bring content to their device in a very user-friendly way, I think, is what I'd be focused on. And Samsung does some of the best user experiences of anyone.
So,
and Sony does
basically,
the worst.
You're going to sell the studio since you're going to decide that's not going to make any difference for you, and you're just going to focus on better interface.
Well, I mean,
interface
you'd
wins.
have the library of content you can bring, but the one studio's worth of content's not enough.
Yeah.
So
That's my point. I mean, you're actually making the bet that the an interface on that screen can beat having the access to having the library of.
I mean, that will help you get started, but you're going to need to make the consumer experience on the screen better. And anyone that has a Sony device these days, you want to die. It's a horrible user experience.
Okay, so Ty, Larry Page called. You've now been given 3 acquisitions. They decided rather than overpaying for Sunday Ticket, they just bought DirecTV, and because Glenn Britt didn't really want to get thrown in and have to work at Charter since he fired or pushed out Tom Rutledge. So you're getting Time Warner Cable too. So he just bought DirecTV and Time Warner Cable, and you get to run that and the whole YouTube franchise.
Right. So I think that what we can say in general.
Oh, and Motorola, you're going to get that as well. So you get a device
part of
company.
it as well. So it's a small integration hurdle. I think. Being at Google, presuming them at Google, we've cornered the market on intent-based marketing. And what you have on the TV side of the business is the ability for massive audiences to see things. I think the trends that we're seeing with our friends at Twitter and our friends at Facebook, and anybody who's doing, and the BuzzFeeds and the people who are doing, people who are doing integrated content marketing, is that it's the in-stream ads that deliver value, and more importantly, it's not just in-stream ads, it's the ads that are tailored directly to the individual user. So if I'm at Google and I've got intent-based marketing down, I'm at the television network, so I have massive audiences, it seems like the way that I would blend both my distribution channels through Time Warner with my local ad avails and my national ad spots through DirecTV is to be able to paint a picture or tell a story with respect to television advertising, which isn't done right now. It's not just a matter of me seeing F-150 ads when I'm clearly never going to buy an F-150, but it's a matter of digital storytelling that's native to the television format based upon my taste graph in terms of what I'm doing in the online world and the offline world. And that's actually the opportunity for marketers, that's the opportunity for content people, and it's the opportunity for distributors, is how to create a better environment, not just for watching content, but actually for delivering intent-based marketing that delivers value from a storytelling perspective. I shouldn't see the same, even if I'm inclined to buy a Ford F-150, I shouldn't see the same commercial over and over. I should see a narrative that's interspersed with the regular content that I'm watching.
I like that. I like all of them. Well, I thank you all very much for participating in this and sharing with us some of your ideas or visions. We have a question out here.
Yeah, just, as an OEM, I'm just wondering why you don't execute that from your sets today.
And if I was unable to do so, I wouldn't be able to talk about it.
But today I should be looking at that, right? Like today.
If there was something that we were working on right now, I wouldn't be able to talk about it.
Anybody else? Well, thanks very much.